Boom. And we're alive and everything looks like it's good. And if you guys are in the chat, please let us know if anything is broken because we can't hear ourselves. Lots of love. Okay, over to you.
All right. Would you like to have a talk with your past self? Sit down for a coffee and have a nice, easy chat with them. Well, that's not exactly what you're going to get with Looper, but you'll get that and a whole lot more with your podcast today. So why don't you sit on down and listen to us? Hey there, all you time-traveling toddlers, you Rian Johnson acolytes, you little film enthusiasts. Welcome back to One with the Films. And I've heard that in the future, podcasts had a rapid rise in popularity, then were swiftly outlawed. So they sent people like myself and my co-host to get all of our bullshit out now. And so you're welcome for the darkest timeline, happy to be a part of it. So I'm one of your hoary hosts, your jolly green gentleman, your wow, this is the weirdest parts work I've ever seen. Break out your blunderbusses, blunder by, wonder why I haven't said hi. I'm Kay, also known as Keegan, also known as Go Dodgers. Thank you for fucking up my traffic route, but at least you won. Guess that's good for some people, and I'm gonna get doxxed if I say otherwise. So, I'm also with, speaking of Dodgers, this guy joining me is, he's your Stan with a plan, the man with those games. Looper, he barely knows her. You're Nito Latino. It's Naf.
Remind me, what are the Dodgers? Are they baseball?
Baseball team.
Nice.
Yeah, they're in the World Series right now.
And World Series, that's so cool. What does that mean?
You're literally asking. You could not have asked a worse guy for that question.
Cool.
Like from my understanding, there are multiple. We lost so many viewers by this conversation alone. There's a lot of World Series games. I know that hold on. You activated the autism. Many world.
Well,
I guess it's 5 to 7.
5 to 7 what games?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's basically like if you took the Super Bowl, instead of making it one event that, winner or loser, you're the best.
Huh.
They're like, oh, we're going to spread it out.
Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, baseball was actually one of the things that I wanted to get to when I was out there, but I didn't get a chance to go see a baseball game. They sound like fun. They look like fun. Okay, cool. Well, yes, I'm Naf. Hi guys, it's a pleasure to be here again on a wonderful Australian morning. We are getting back to our usual time pretty soon, though. It's in a couple more weeks of being all over the place, and we should be back to our regular schedule.
This should be our second to last week of this weird, wonky schedule.
Yes, exciting, sick. But yeah, I'm really excited to get into today's episode. This is one of my picks, so. I'm keen to get into it.
Very, very, very cool. And obviously this is an incredible thing, but as a reminder, you can find One with the Films on your podcasting platform of choice, as you most likely have found here, as well as live and on demand right here on YouTube. And if you are in the live chat, please feel free to join in the conversation. We always love to hear from you. And if you're listening on demand, don't worry, we still love you. That being said, Naf, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what we're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. Today's an episode of the Weekly Watch List. And the Weekly Watch List is what happens when a couple of friends with unique and wonderful taste in films have tried too hard for too long to finally share and discuss their favorite films with one another. So if you've been around for a while, you already know the shtick, right? But if you're uninitiated, however, the idea is that for every episode, at least one person is watching the chosen film for the first time. It's about having a space for creators to share the art that matters most to them and then give them a platform to show us all why. In today's case, it's me giving myself a platform, which is really exciting. So if you like listening to a bunch of geeks nerd out and force each other to watch and then discuss their favorite films for the very first time, you can feel free to follow and or subscribe. You can send us to your friends if you like, and you can always activate notifications so you never miss a new episode as well. And of course, we're on all of your favorite socials too, so links are in the description below for anything you might want to check out there. That's us, baby.
Absolutely. Of course. And so Naf,
Yes, sir.
What's a brilliant film that not enough people have seen?
Well, I'm going to hit you with 2012's Looper, written and directed by Rian Johnson and
Ooh.
starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis. This is one of my personal favorite films. It's one that it's a pretty easy one to recommend to people because I think that it bridges the like high sci-fi concepts with some entry-level stuff, so it makes it a bit easy for people to come into and just get without having to think too much. So yeah, it's one of my faves.
Absolutely. And would that be your one sentence as to why people should do this, or do you have
No,
a
my
better
one
sentence
sentence.
for that?
Yes, the guy who made this made the best Star Wars film of all time.
That'll do it. That'll do it. That'll do it. I didn't know he did Rogue One. And so as we're going on, well, why don't you tell me a little bit about when you first discovered this movie?
Yeah, for sure. So this was the first Rian Johnson film that I watched. If I recall correctly, it was the year that it was in theaters. So it released in September in 2012. I went with my older brother to the cinemas to watch this movie, and we both just had a great time. And I've just been in love with it ever since. I've watched it probably 5 or 6 times now. It was actually a few weeks ago that I was just chilling at home, and I was like, I need like a comfort day of films. And I watched this and District 9 back to back, and I was just like, I love this. I've introduced this film to a lot of people.
You got to show me District 9. That's got to be on the list after this.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Those two are like probably two of my favorite sci-fi movies. But well, actually, I would say like in a different like caliber of sci-fi films. You know, 'cause I feel like there's the Blade Runners and the Dune, and like those are all.
Sci-fi just is so expansive.
Yeah, it is, right? And I feel like I'm not going to sit here and say that this film is as masterfully crafted as Dune Part 1 and Part 2, but like I love it just as much. It's like a really easy watch. So I've just been in love with this film for the longest time. When I found out that Rian Johnson was coming to do The Last Jedi, I had gone in with pre-excitement because he had done this film that I loved. So even before that film came out, I was going, I think he's like the perfect guy to come in and do Star Wars. I feel like
Totally.
it'd be really interesting what he does, because as we know, Rian Johnson tends to take like concepts and genres and play with them a little bit, play with expectations a bit, and this film absolutely does that as well. So yeah, that's my connection to this film. And for you, you've gone in watching it for the first time this week. How
That
did
is
you
correct.
go all this time not having seen it? Did you like know about it?
You know, I definitely knew about it because I had a friend of mine in high school who was definitely, I wish it was you, frankly. It was because I had a friend. I don't know if he listens to this podcast. I doubt he does. We're not really in touch as much anymore. Who wishes he was you in the sense that like it's a person that very much has a very particular view on movies, and it's kind of like we'll find any excuse to talk about those movies with or without your consent. And this was one of them. And that was the first place I had heard about it because it was still back in, I didn't really have social media at the time. So and back before social media was really being used to promote films as much as it is now.
Yeah.
But I think I heard about it then, the whole concept of like, I remember it just being Joseph Gordon-Levitt, something about killing your past selves, like Hitman, that there was like a crazy scene with dismembering body parts, something like that. And then since then it had been what was that?
I was just going to add the tagline for the film is really cool in the sense it's hunted by your future, haunted by your past.
Oh. Yeah, it's a great tagline. Great, like good job to the marketing team. And it's always been one of those that's always been on the list, but I think because it's kind of like it's one of those films similar to when we were talking about Silence of the Lambs earlier. It's like you hear it through the grapevine, but you look at it as like you assume that everything that this film can't surprise you.
Yeah.
you know, or like that you're like, okay, I've seen a lot of his work since, and it's like, I don't know if I want to go back, but I just had always been waiting. And then when you obviously being a big Rian Johnson lover, I was like, you know, I think it'd be cool to do it for the podcast, like to wait until we actually are going to do it for an episode. And today is that day.
Hell yeah, baby.
So yeah, that's so I had always been interested, but just had never kind of gotten around to it.
Yeah, for sure. I get it. It's one of those ones that, as we'll go into in like fun facts as well, like, it did quite well, just like relative to its budget, but it wasn't by any means like a huge release. So a lot of people haven't seen this film, which is why it's a great one to, recommend to people and show them, especially when they love sci-fi.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Like a part of me does forget how like Rian Johnson before Last Jedi was kind of not really well known. Like, because I mean, I knew him from Breaking Bad, obviously. Like that was where my exposure to Rian Johnson really came in, where with his 3 episodes of Breaking Bad, and that was why I was excited. Three of the best episodes of the entire show, including the best episode of the entire show. So I was very excited to see him like go over to Star Wars, but I had not seen any of his films, so this was kind of cool to. It's just crazy to me now that it's like, yeah, now you say Rian Johnson, he is for like lack of a better phrase, a household name director.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now,
and especially obviously coming off the back of the Knives Out series that has been kicked off. The third one's just finishing filming and is in
so
post-production,
excited.
so really keen for that to come out as well. But what do you reckon? You ready to jump into some fun
Poker
facts?
Face? If people have not seen Poker Face, you gotta fucking see Poker Face.
Yeah,
I have not got a chance to finish it, but that series is fucking great.
It is awesome. So you ready to jump into some fun facts?
Well, yeah, launch us into some fun facts, my brother. Get in there.
All right, baby, let's go. So, seeing both critical and box office success with its release on the 12th of September 2012, this film was made on a budget of US $30 million and brought in $176 million US at the worldwide box office. It has a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb from 610,000 reviews and 3.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd from 632,000 watches. The film was written and directed by Rian Johnson with his usual creative collaborators. That's Steve Yedlin for cinematography, his brother Nathan Johnson for music, and producing alongside Ram Bergman and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, with Noah Segan also being present for a role as per usual in a Rian Johnson flick. Noah Segan actually took several classes to learn how to spin his 4-pound gun on his finger, and in the end Rian Johnson used the take where he almost dropped it just because he thought that was funniest. The screenplay for Looper was featured in the 2010 Blacklist, which is a list of the most liked yet unmade scripts of that year. Joseph Gordon-Levitt has appeared in some fashion in every one of Rian Johnson's films, but this was the second time that he appeared as a major character. For this film, he was also fitted with prosthetics to help him appear more like Bruce Willis, and did such a good job that Willis even stated that he recognized his own mannerisms in their scenes together, which we will talk about. Alongside Levitt and Willis, the film also stars Emily Blunt, Jeff Daniels, and Pierce Gagnon. And the film was nominated for 4 Saturn Awards and 5 Critics' Choice Awards, including Best Actor, Actress, Action Movie, Screenplay, and Best Sci-Fi/Horror, which it won. It's 118 minutes of sci-fi, near-future, dystopian goodness. I'm not sure if you have anything you'd want to add to that, Kay.
No, I don't know if it's on there or not. Now, might be a rumor, so the audience, if you know, please tell me if this is true or not. But I was telling Neff that I had heard that the whole reason that they fit Joseph Gordon-Levitt with prosthetics, and not only just to make him look like Bruce Willis, but the thing was that they initially were approaching Bruce Willis at first for the movie. That was the first casting call that they were making, was like, okay, we'll get the older actor, and then whoever we need him to be younger. Basically, they were kind of like, if we need to get a lesser known actor to play the older, or like whichever way. And what I had heard was that Rian Johnson had approached Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis wasn't interested. So he was like, okay, too bad. I'll go to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. We already like sort of worked together on other things. Let's go and do this. And then the contract was all drawn up. Things were already getting close to production. And then Bruce Willis changed his mind and wanted to do it. And so they were like, well, we already have Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Like, a lot of stuff is already being done. but now Bruce Willis wants to do it. Is there any way we can make Joseph Gordon-Levitt look a little bit more like Bruce Willis? To which a great ass makeup team was hired.
Yeah.
And now I don't know how true that is. That's just what I heard. I could be making this shit up.
I mean, I looked up on because I use IMDb's like trivia page to get a lot of the details.
Yeah.
Usually stuff like that does show up, like stories. I didn't see that in there. It could very well be true. One thing I did see, however, is that originally with Joe, which is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, funnily enough, he was learning French because he wanted to move to Paris. And originally the script actually called for them to film the future in Paris, but the budget didn't actually allow for it. Then within there, I believe the president of Shanghai, or like the film company, here we go. The Chinese distributor for the film offered to pay for the crew to film in Shanghai, and then Johnson accepted because it solved the Paris problem, and he felt that Shanghai better reflected the future setting of the movie too. So it kind of did, fit.
Wow,
so he kind of
makes
altered
sense.
the script in that sense. But didn't see any other stuff around the Bruce Willis side of things. It is really interesting, however. Also, funnily enough, we were talking before stream that Joseph Gordon-Levitt's actually fluent in French, and this is the second film in which he studies to learn French. So that's always wild.
And always got to have that. Always got to, be. I think that it's very fun. And there are a couple of videos about Rian Johnson talking about casting Bruce Willis. So I don't obviously want to watch those right now, but I will be interested to finding out how true that is.
Watch those, right? You don't want to stop
on.
the podcast and just watch videos about Rian Johnson talking about.
You know what? You're right. We need to do this.
Sorry,
I also
guys,
need to know how the World Series works. And so
there's a video for that as well.
But exactly, there's an app for that, don't you know?
Well, before we get into the conversation,
before we go, and if okay. Well, listen, I'm happy to take the reins on this one if you would like.
Well, I was going to say that before we get into the conversation, Kay, did you want to take us through how spoilers work in this place?
Well, I would love to, Nev. Thank you for turning it over to me. I really appreciate it. You're just so kind. Before we go any further, all these conversations are not spoiler-free. We're not necessarily doing a play-by-play, but we're talking about the film with the expectation that you have already seen it. It's always cool to go and watch the film and check back later, but even if you haven't seen the film, chances are we'll convince you to finally make that leap. And if you want to know what film to watch in advance so you can come in prepared for next week, links are in the description for all our socials, so check us out there. And if you listen all the way to the end of today's episode, we'll also be revealing our next film and guest right here. All right, let's roll.
I love it. It's very like old-fashioned trailer from the early 2010s.
Like early 2000s? Yeah.
Probably, I can imagine, I don't think I ever saw a trailer for this film, but I can imagine it really falling into that category. We were talking about
it also kind of has a little bit of EA Sports. It's in the game.
Yeah. Do you see the TikTok where they
have
found
you seen
that
the
guy?
video of that guy doing it? Like that one of the guys like, I need you to shut up. I need to shut up real quick. Shopaholics. And just the
yeah,
crazy.
It's brilliant. We were talking just before stream as well around how this film has some of the coolest and lamest posters at the same time. It feels very like
for sure
of that era, back turned to the camera, back to back people action films. And it's like, you could market this film as like a kill your future self action film. It's not necessarily what it is. And we're going to get into a lot of that as we break it down. But I wanted to kick us off with a bit of a conversation around the world building in particular. We get this kind of like neo-noir setting at the start with this voiceover explaining what's going on in this world. And it sets it up really well, I believe. I wondered, what was your experience with the start of this film as it's laying out the rules?
I felt that, again, my whole thing with time travel films, as we'll discuss, time travel sucks. Like in any film, it is a thing of not in a sense of I'm a pessimist about time travel, but as opposed, we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Primer, right? And the guy from Primer, famously, as we mentioned in that episode, talked about how Rian Johnson handed the script to Looper to that guy, and the guy said, "This is rubbish. This is stupid. Time travel doesn't work like this." And it's just two opposing minds talking about how they view time travel,
and at the same time, two guys who are really good friends putting that out there.
No. It's like you and I talking about things that we value in film, right? Like it's the thing
when we
of
talk
like,
about my taste, which is good, and your taste, which is West Side Story.
And it's great. And so, like, you have good, I have great.
Friends.
It's
we
fine.
We can still be friends even
exactly.
though you're wrong. That's what we're getting at.
It's okay that you have a poorer taste. Just give it a couple of years, baby, and give it a couple of years in a film degree.
It's not my fault that you like racist films, dude. It's not my fault.
It's not my fault that my films improve racism, and so
they improve So chat, clip that.
Shit.
That it's not what he meant.
Improve upon racist films.
Oh, you're not helping yourself.
I'm going to go with that.
Move on.
Anyway, I'm a dwarf and I'm digging a hole, and but to that end, what I love is it's like, you know, you have these two different mentalities. One who's very scientific about where the whole film focuses on the paradox of time travel, versus this who uses time travel more thematically rather than like, yes, it's literal. Like, obviously it's a plot point. It's a big device in the film, but the point of time travel being there is to emphasize a point. And I think time travel is one of those things that you just have to accept. It's not going to make sense. You just have to accept it. Like, you just have to, it's like any good sci-fi. You just have to illustrate to me, the viewer, what the rules are. What are your rules? And you have to stick to them.
Yeah, I think
as a
you're
creator.
Exactly right. It's pretty much my same thoughts on time travel films, right? It's like the concept of this doesn't get it right, or this would cause a paradox, or this would do this, or this would do that. It's like, yes, it would in our real universe where you cannot time travel. Within, I believe, like a story that features time travel, the way that I see it, at least, and it's just, again, just my opinion. If anybody listening doesn't agree, it's like, that's cool. But I see it as the rules of time travel exist exclusively as you lay them out to me.
Precisely.
And, again, sometimes people break their own rules. And within this film, it's one of those things that, like, when I try and think about the loop concept of it all, it's actually kind of, I find that it leans on the paradox. It gets you stuck. That's why it's a looper. Like, you're constantly in that loop. It's closing that loop. You're always going to go around in a circle and around in a circle. And that's like paradoxical.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is one of those things where it plays on a couple of ideas here that are really interesting. And it also somehow works in different timelines, similar to how Primer works too. Like, you kind of anticipate that it's just like one version of this guy that comes back and goes. And it's like, no, it's like there are a few different versions here that are kind of happening in tandem. And by the time we get to the antagonist version of it, he's like that's what I find really interesting, right? It's you have the start, it flows, main guy shows up, flows backwards, and then you kind of live the rest of the life with that version of Joe, which is the guy that you were introduced to at the start, and then that version of Joe is the one that comes back, and so you kind of everything about the villain, and then you have a new story for the protagonist. It's kind of like changed perspectives. I find that
which is why, exactly as you're saying, and I think that's why this film works, right? Like, it's one of those things where, and Rian Johnson does a really good job at the beginning laying out, as you said, all the rules. He lays out all this stuff, all these interesting little tidbits about the world. And kind of as you're saying, it's like, listen, I get that we want things to be consistent. We want things to this. But I think about similar with magic in fantasy world. Just tell me your rules. But there's a great, I think Brandon Sanderson has a great thing with magic, which is there should be an inverse correlation between magic's easy ability to be wielded and its ability to solve problems. So there should be an inverse effect there. So it shouldn't be easy to cast and easy to solve problems. If it's easy to cast, it shouldn't be able to solve a lot of problems. If it's hard to cast, it should be able to solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's like you have to have that inverse thing. And I think that they do the same thing with time travel here, where it's more of an inconvenience than it is a help.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the world he builds is like very grounded, very interesting. It did make me laugh a bit seeing how he portrays this crazy ass city. That was just like reminding me of a GTA server.
Mhm.
that was like, just like, oh, somebody steals something. This guy just looks like it's a pain, pulls out a shotgun, just shoots this guy in the back.
Yep. Yeah,
And
tries
I'm
to
just
steal
like, what the hell is going on? But his car is just weaving past them like it's nothing. And I'm like,
this is just
yeah,
normal.
so in the future, we just go to GTA rules.
I love the use of. So this is another thing I think that Rian Johnson does really well, and it's plant and payoff, right? Like a really big concept in this film is, which we'll dive into a lot more a little bit later in the conversation, but like it's TK, telekinesis, right? And it's introduced
I was going to mention that
as a, oh yeah, TK happened, but like, oh, whatever, it's just guys trying to like pick up chicks,
girls, yeah.
And we don't really talk about it again until much later in the film. And I love that plant and payoff because the way that it's introduced versus the kind of 2 moments later in the film in which it hits its peak are scarily different and shocking.
Oh, yeah.
Which I hope that in the time not having seen the film, I was actually hoping that particularly that first scene where we see Sid use his TK, that it would be shocking to you.
Oh, I didn't know it. That was one of the things I did not know. And that was actually something, again, going into Rian Johnson's writing.
Please.
I think that's a perfect transition. Rian Johnson is brilliant at this. And obviously you see it in the Knives Out films. You see it in even Last Jedi. But like his writing is really good at trying not to leave any stone unturned. He expects you to be paying attention to his films as much as he's paying attention to making them. And I always admire that about a creator. I hate that. That's why it's like, love it or hate it for ADHD people who have to sit down and really focus on something. It is tough to watch, find the time to watch movies like this, but it's like, but you almost want to, because this creator requires that of you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where it's like, and I was curious because, again, knowing how Knives Out works, I was like, how much of this film is, oh, this scene that plays out, how much is he showing me, how much is he not showing me? Like, where does this like rank in all of the Rian Johnson setups and shit? And I feel like with his writing, as you were saying, like the telekinesis element really was probably the best example of that, because I totally forgot about it. I totally forgot about all of the telekinesis shit until like the kid starts doing things, and I was like, oh fuck, especially when when all of that happened. And then as it kept going, because also it's like you're giving this to a kid. It's kind of like in Logan when they give Professor X having like seizures and having like brain aneurysms. It's like, oh, this is really dangerous.
Yeah.
Like if the greatest mind in the world is failing, it's like you're giving these intense powers to a child who doesn't know how to wield it, who is very impulsive, very emotional, very traumatized. And kudos to the performances of that fucking kid,
the kid
man.
is like, and I looked up his IMDb page, and he hasn't done much else, which is really interesting.
I was wondering.
But like, I agree that his performance is fantastic. And also in terms of like the writing, right? I think that there's something really interesting that happens here with not just our expectation, us following like young Joe, but I really like the choices that were made with Sid in particular. And Sid being like, hey, that's not my mom. And it's like, no, it is.
It is.
But like she gave you away because she wanted to live her life in the city, went out, he fell off the shelf and killed his auntie, who he thought was his mom, doesn't really remember any of that. And then this lady's just shown up to take care of him instead. It's like, this film, as you called perfectly quoted the title of this episode as time travel therapy. This film just features everyone here needing therapy and handling it in just not the best way at all, and
it's really brilliant how, because none of the characters that show up are used in the way that you expect them to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think
like
that
Bruce Willis turns into a bit more of an antagonist in the story. The like you think that Jeff Daniels' character is going to be a huge threat, and he kind of is, but he's not the main threat. You think that, Joseph Gordon-Levitt kind of is like this asshole moment. Emily Blunt, you're like, how much does she know? And then it's like, you don't know everything about her. It's like, it's crazy. Like, this movie does a lot to, it's kind of like when you're playing a video game. It's like, oh, I have this character all figured out. And then you're like, no, you don't. You didn't know shit about him.
You're right, and I think that something the film does really well here as well, in terms of the writing too, is people will often talk about Rian Johnson just wanting to subvert expectations for like the sake of it. You look at Star Wars and go, this is all the stuff we wanted from Star Wars, and he just like shat on us instead, that kind of vibe. And personally, I don't agree with that, but like I can understand where people end up there. I think one thing that this film does really well is the expectations that it's breaking are the expectations that itself has set up. Like, for example, we get our intro where everything's perfectly timed, right? And then we get to the point where Joe shows up, and you feel the same anxiety. Sorry, the old Joe shows up. You feel the same anxiety that young Joe feels because everything's perfectly timed, and he goes tick, 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 tick.
Yep.
He doesn't show up, and he's like, hold on. And then he shows up, and he's not tied up. And it actually, I found that even in multiple watches, the anxiety builds up, and you feel the stomach drop when he shows up. It's like, oh, and obviously coming off the back of, we'll dive into some of the performances in a bit as well. But yeah, no, your point first.
Can I touch on that? Can I touch on that scene as well? Like, because I really want to compliment him as well. I want to give him the flowers for the scene because like I knew that was coming. Like, just due to seeing clips, seeing the trailer, I know the general premise of the movie. And what was funny was because I was like, I've been working horror nights, so I've been like dealing with a lot of like sleep stuff. So I'm like, oh, I set myself a timer when I started the movie. I set a timer for like 30 minutes, thinking that was all I was going to have time for that night. Which obviously, if you've read any filmmaking books, any writing books, tends to be about 30 pages until the inciting incident. That scene showed up 30 minutes into the movie, like perfectly on the dot of like, that's end of third act or end of first act going into second act. And, but what's so brilliant about that scene is when you look at shot selection and editing wise, obviously, you were complimenting Steve Yedlin, right? Cinematographer,
who has worked with Rian Johnson on every one of his films as director of photography.
Absolutely, and rightly so. They excellently work together. And then shout out to the editor. I don't know the editor's name offhand. I'll look it up in a second. But the shot selection was so great because every other time it's been these static shots of like kind of these wide shots of
and
him,
then you get
like
that POV shot of getting punched in the face,
yeah, well, but the thing is, it's before that even. It's when he's looking at the watch, gets set up, it's like mirroring the opening of the film, like down to the T of everything, until it goes a little bit past when the opening does. And then the camera is like looking at Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and for the first time it starts pushing in. It starts pushing in, and it's that,
and it's like a digital zoom too. It doesn't feel like it's in camera. It feels like it's cropping in, right?
Yeah,
it's a little
because it doesn't. It feels either like it's a physical zoom or because it doesn't feel like a dolly push in. It definitely feels like odd.
Yeah, to me it feels like they cropped in on Premiere or whatever, and then just synced the two. It's like, oh, hold on, what's going on?
It is, and it starts just building that anxiety. And I love when films do that because it's my favorite thing of when you use cinematic language that you have set up and use it against an audience. Again, it's similar. He does stuff with Knives Out, like a Glass Onion and shit like that. Sorry, what was that?
I was just going to add that you were talking about the editor before, and just to give them their flowers too. So Bob Duxey is the editor. This is the first film in which he worked with Rian Johnson in. But he did go on to edit The Last Jedi, Knives Out, Glass Onion, and Poker Face. So
makes sense. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I know one of the editor that I use for most of my stuff, love her to death, and it's one of those things where cinematographer, editor, production design, and producer, it's like, I mean, fuck, if you just get your department heads and you're like really solid with all those department heads, it's like it becomes such a beautiful relationship. But yeah, so going further with it, Is there anything more you want touched on sort of the writing and scenes, or do you want to move on to performances?
Well, one of the things, because we don't really have much on like cinematography in our conversation today, so I'm sure we'll just weave in and out. But I love that particularly that scene you talk about. We get to see it from multiple angles in the film as well. So that kind of like POV type shot. And then later when we come back to it, you see the wide of what actually happened when we see like Joe's perspective. Or we kind of see Joe's perspective first.
And that happens a couple times in the film.
Yeah.
Which is always fun. I always love seeing different versions of the same scene from different perspectives, because it is so funny because it's also done without music. So you just see him like just toss the rock at him and then just come up, punch him in the face. It's like watching security cam footage of something happening. It's like, oh, all right.
And it's interesting talking about like edits in these films as well, because like one of the things that kind of famously with Rian Johnson's first film, which also starred Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Brick, he edited that film himself on his laptop. And I was just looking up the second film he did, which is Brothers Bloom, which I really like as well, and I'd love to watch with you at some point. We don't really need to do it for the podcast, but that was edited by Gabriel Rye, and they hadn't done much other stuff that I could see. So it's like he's done one himself, one with somebody else that he's found, and then he's found his kind of person and stuck with them. And it goes to show, because there's consistency, visual consistency in a Rian Johnson film. Down to like, I was watching some other stuff that I thought was really interesting, and Rian Johnson and Ram Bergman both produce, they're co-producers for things, and they bring other people in. But it was interesting, there's a couple of other films that I'd watched recently that I was like, this feels like something that, you know, these guys would shoot and put together, and then at the end produced by these guys. And it's, you know, I know they weren't necessarily there day to day guiding it, but it's like I can see how there probably was a bit of influence on, hey, why don't you try this? Like there was a film that came out last year called Fair Play, which I remember watching and going, this is cool. It feels kind of like this vibe.
Yeah.
But and in the end, I saw I was produced by Rian Johnson and Ram Bergman, and I was like, you can see what these guys are passionate about in all the projects.
It's similar, and obviously it's hard to tell, like, you know, which, because sometimes when people produce things, sometimes it's just like a name on it almost, and it's like, and sometimes that helps. And then there are other times where they're deeply involved in the process, and it's always interesting. It's like Spielberg has like so many goddamn producing credits. Like his company and everything that has produced so much shit. Like I think that he's had a fair amount of Oscar nominations just simply for producing the film. And like it's crazy. So I completely agree. And then there are those films where you're like, this feels like this kind of movie. Then you watch it and you're like, oh damn. But going to some of the performances, we talked about the kid. I know I definitely want to talk about Joseph Gordon-Levitt and give him his goddamn flowers. What a performances like struck you as like really stuck out to you?
There's one that I really want your opinion on. There's one here that I love, and I think Kid Blue is hilarious. Like he's kind of what's the word? It's like unintentional comedic relief. You know, like he's
definitely
funny. He's funny, and the guys in the film all don't take him seriously at all. Even his like boss, you know. Like there's the bit with Jeff Bridges and the hammer, which oof, you know. But
scary.
So Kid Blue,
scary as hell.
He's funny, but the one that stands out to me each time I watch this film is Paul Dano.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted your thoughts on his performance in this film. And then old Paul Dano as well. And I want to talk about how they kind of...
Oh, yeah. You mentioned something about like how crazy way they filmed that scene. And I was curious to hear your, like how they did do that. Like, I think I know how they did it, but I'm like, I am curious to hear your fun facts about that scene. But Paul Dano, like mostly in his career, like right now, I think that last year he had just a really good year with Fabelmans and Batman, or I guess it was 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
But it was.
That's okay. I have no concept of time since the pandemic anyway. So
since the pandemic, I feel like time is what is time.
Yeah.
But Paul Dano has always been one of those actors that shows up in something. He's similar to how I feel about John Bernthal for a while, which was going, oh shit, he's in this movie.
Yeah.
And just go like I would always joke around with John Bernthal being like, I don't think I ever know John Bernthal's in a movie. I'd find out John Bernthal's in a movie.
And it's always
like,
a pleasant surprise.
It's always a pleasant surprise. Like Paul Dano is one of those actors that just classes up the joint.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as I see him in a movie, I'm like, this is probably going to be a good one.
Paul Dano has a very specific like vibe to him as well. Right?
Yeah,
like,
he knows his vibe.
Yeah, like he's very much leaned into it. Because even down to how he plays Riddler, it's very similar to how he plays the character here. But there's the moment where at the start we've got this goofy kind of guy. You don't really know what's up, but I love particularly his performance when he comes knocking at Joe's door at night.
Yeah.
And he comes in and he's talking about what happened. And like his performance there is fantastic. I think that's a standout.
He's earnest. Like the thing about Paul Dano in all of his roles, like, because I mean, his There Will Be Blood performance is kind of similar to this. Is like, it's not similar as in like, oh, he just plays the same character. He plays very different characters, but they are in this same wavelength of either think too highly of themselves or are so low and don't quite know it yet.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that like I find they don't quite like, his performances always are just this insane meld of those two things. And I love his performance, particularly in this movie, mainly because he comes in and he sets up how hard it is to end your loop.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I saw him. He was singing this same song that was sung to me.
That Mom used to sing to us.
This, and like
the way he's delivering this as
he,
well is like, you know, he's blubbering, crying. He's just like, oh my God.
Because he knows he's died. He knows he's dead.
Yeah.
He knows he's dead. He knows what's going to happen to him. He knows how this is going to end. And it's one of those things of, he's apologetic, but he's also kind of standing his ground to whatever degree of this. And you can just tell from Joseph Gordon-Levitt, it's like, brother, why did we get me involved in this shit?
And I think it also builds up Joe's character as well, because, you know, at first he goes in to, what's his name? The bad guy.
Abe?
Yeah, so he goes in to see Abe, and he's very much like, I haven't seen him. Nah, he's gone here, he's gone here. And Abe's just been like, brother, we know you're hoarding your silver, so I'm going to give you a choice. You give up half your silver, or you give up this guy. And he has to make that choice between his future or like, it's like.
And that tells us a lot about Joe.
Yeah,
and
it's like he is pragmatic in that sense. Like he's made arguably the right decision. You know, like he could have stayed with his friend, but it would have ended horribly for both of them. You know, and the follow up from Abe being like, hey, here, go spend a night in the club. Have some drops, that kind of stuff. It's kind of heartbreaking, that scene. And we get the interplay from there, because that's where we kind of move into Paul Dano goes into surgery and old Paul Dano is running around and they're trying to find him. And we change the perspective in that film. And this is probably the moment for me in the film that I was like, oh.
Yep.
Oh. And it's really cool how they put this together.
I expected this to be later in the film, mind you. Like, cause I knew this scene existed. I just didn't know what was involved. And I was surprised. Like, it made sense, but I was surprised it came as early as it did.
I love, in terms of the craft of this scene too, like so much of this is, almost all of it is done practically, obviously bar chopping noses off and things like that. But particularly as he's heading back to the address he needs to arrive at, there's two moments. One is accelerating and the foot disappears. That shot.
That was scary.
So cool. And then the follow-up is as he's getting out of the car and the legs fully disappear and he falls and has to crawl with his arms. They used an actor that actually had like an amputee to put that together as well. So they made these prosthetics, so they were able to put on the leg that were able to kind of fall away and that person could move and crawl. So like this isn't CGI. This is practical how they've put this shot together. It's actually insane. And obviously by the end,
so
you get
cool.
there, he's banging on the wall, and I love the shot of the door opening and the gun.
Oh yeah. Well, I love how black, like dark and black and bleak it is. I will say, I expected this to come up more in the film. Like, they made such a big deal of it that I expected the Doctor to come by. Like, I'm glad they used it in the way that they did, of like the arrow, and that scene is so impactful that you're like, the minute you see that arrow, it's like, oh my God, did he
did he get caught? Like, what's
did he get picked up? Did he get, like, what happened?
Yeah.
I was surprised the Doctor never came back.
Yeah,
I was surprised about that.
I think within the story, again,
like,
it makes sense because he doesn't get caught. If he got caught, it would make a lot of sense. But like, you're right. It's one of those things that is introduced and it's so cool, and it would have been nice to see it more, but I understand why it didn't fit.
Totally. It's kind of like he resisted the right urge, which would have been to find some convoluted way to bring this thing back.
Which I think, again, is a lot of how he plants and pays off in this film. It's like he sets up these ideas and then it goes, like, particularly we were talking about the edit before, but that moment where he falls off of the range hood, not the range hood, sorry, off of the, and he hits back, and then we get the flashback to everything that kind of happened in between.
Yep.
And we come back to Bruce Willis seeing him. I did see a funny thing in the trivia that scene was shot on Joseph Gordon-Levitt's birthday. And there was a point where they just left him hanging on the wires, and the entire crew came around to singing "Happy Birthday" while he was just hanging.
So funny.
Funny.
That's iconic.
Yeah, but like, it's so cool. But yeah, Paul Dano stands out to me a lot. Abe Jeff Daniels is actually so menacing in this film.
Oh yeah. We were talking a little bit about that off mic. Like, he sets up, and what's interesting is because the way narratively the movie sets him up as the big bad. Yeah. You don't really realize that Bruce Willis is mainly the antagonist throughout the movie. Yeah. Because he sets up almost like the victim. Yeah. Like, in this whole thing, and
what I found really interesting.
But Jeff Daniels just comes in as a menacing motherfucker.
He is, right? And it's something that we could talk about at length as well. And I don't want to go spending hours and hours on that, but particularly Joseph Gordon-Levitt's performance as Bruce Willis. Like, one of the things that we said earlier was, I feel like they did a really good job of making Joseph Gordon-Levitt look like a young Bruce Willis, but not a great job of making old Bruce Willis look like an old Joseph Gordon-Levitt. There's a little transition period in there that I still think is hilarious every time I watch it, which is when he shows up and his hair, and it's like, what?
Cut my life into pieces is the vibe I get. It's like it's a guy who's never left his emo phase is the vibe. It's definitely one of those things that, like, the transition there, it also felt like it's easier to have Bruce Willis act like Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon act like Bruce Willis than to have Bruce Willis act a little bit like Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And kudos to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, man. Like, he had a mountain to move, because obviously Bruce Willis's mannerisms are very iconic.
And as we said earlier, he was able to pick up on some of that from there. And it was to the point that I remember watching this movie and going, is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt? I'm not sure. I think it's him.
It's the contact lenses, man. The contact lenses to do wonders. Yeah. For that man, like, because those green eyes and his whole demeanor of, like, the kind of smile and the crook of the mouth, and
he gets that so right. That little.
He also gets how Bruce Willis acts. Yeah, because it's a different thing than most. Like, it's tough because it's like when you're now having to portray another actor. It's kind of like the young girl that played Ray Seahorn in Better Call Saul, where it's like, it's not just about saying the lines and looking like them. Yeah. And it's also not like acting like the actor. You have to act how this person acts, not just, it's not just, if you do a Liam Neeson impression, it's like, you can sound like him, but you need to know how Liam Neeson performs. Yeah. Yeah. You can't just do that, you know? And that's a very difficult thing that he pulled off in a remarkable way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that I like the ending to this film is a little controversial for people that want things to be really scientifically accurate in a science fiction film. But we were talking before just around the use of this TK, what's it called? Like, not effect, but like skill, I guess, that people have, or the mutation. Yeah. And how it goes from 0 to 100 so quickly. And there's this kind of, I think it's 3 key moments. It's the one inside the house, which I'd love to talk about in depth, but, time. The second one is as
we can still go a little bit longer than 45. Like hard cutoff is 4, like on the hour.
Well, yeah, so there's that one there, which is really cool. And then we get to the part where the truck is flipped as they're running. It's like, no, don't, you know? And then the last one
the truck is,
as everything is kind of ending, you know? He thinks his mum is dead. He's lifting everything up, and you see Bruce Willis hanging at the top. And I love the shot of her coming into, he's in frame and her coming into frame.
Yes.
Oh, man. But the wire work is insanely good here.
It's great because and this kind of ties in everything. Like, and I think like we can talk about the TK stuff in terms of the ending, the sci-fi concepts and performances. Like, I mean, honestly, everything that we've written down, what I love about this film, and I think the thing that for me, when I look at this film, that I was like, okay, the premise is really good. It's one of those films that, like, if you told me the premise, I'm in. Like, this sounds like an interesting premise. I'm there for it. But I was like, there has to be a reason that this sticks with people. There has to be something. And it was getting down to the wire with this movie where I was like, okay, where are they going with this whole thing? Like, what is it that where's this movie heading? This is a really intense moment that they got. Him killing himself was the last thing I expected. Like, it's obvious in front of you. Like, once it happens, you're like, oh, duh, that's how they get out of this. But he's done such a great job at showing you all these moments and all of, like, literally, like, how this movie can go in all these ways.
The voiceover is great there too, where he goes, and then I saw it. It all played out, you know, a kid without his mum, and he sees how. Oh, yeah. It's one of those, one of my favorite, like, concept or themes in general is that sort of self-realized. Like you try and change your past so much that you create what it was going to be. You know, it happens to Cersei in Game of Thrones a lot, and it's a big thing in lots of like fantasy and fiction. But seeing Joseph Gordon-Levitt, seeing old Joe come back in time to try and stop the Rainmaker, it's like.
But you created the Rainmaker.
Created him, yeah. It's like so we stop it by getting rid of Joe. But again, it comes down to if he had, what would have happened, because the Rainmaker's doing a lot of like the work up in the future too, but you know he's been cleaning house, so it's weird to think of where the universe would have gone.
Well, and it's crazy because I think that they also set you up so anything can happen, because we actually see the kid get shot, and I think that that's one of those moments that Rian Johnson's like, I know you're not used to seeing this shit, so he sets you off balance because we actually see it's not a. Because earlier on in the film, he does the, like, kind of masks it by being like, oh, you see Bruce Willis's eyes and then fires the gun. Like, you don't actually see the kid, because we don't want to see that, obviously. Like, we're human beings, and that's a very hard image to watch. But when you see that happen to the kid, I feel like Rian Johnson is putting the audience in the standpoint of all bets are off.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen.
Like, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen with this kid.
I know it's one of the things, like, we don't talk about it that much in this film in terms of Bruce Willis's performance, but particularly that first time that he kills the kid. And then it comes back to, he's like, he kind of thinks that he's going to disappear when that happens, because once the Rainmaker's gone, the Rainmaker didn't kill his wife, and then therefore he just goes back to where he was beforehand. That's what he's expecting to happen. And so he kills a kid, he doesn't disappear, and the memory continues changing. Like, if you think about how much that would affect you as a person, going, I just killed a kid for no reason. He didn't need to die. By the time we get to Joe at the end, it's someone who's like, this is all I have left. This is who I am now.
And that's the thing that I think this movie does really well is it starts you off with this character who's doing something that we've seen in movies before. We've seen this thing. We get it. It's one of those moments that builds you up, and you're like, yep, I get why he would do this. I may agree with it, I may not, but like, I understand the laws of time travel. I understand these vibes. But then what I love about the film is it does make us question that. And it gets to the point of having, like, Emily Blunt, like, what if he had somebody? Like, I know he is capable of being this thing. I know it. I'm not blind to it. But if he had me in his life, what would happen? Maybe it would change. Maybe it would be this. And the film is about second chances. The film is about actually redemption, but it's done in a way of like, it's kind of shows you a bad example of that, of a guy who's like, this girl straightens you out. This girl does everything for you. You're going to want to meet her. You're going to want to do anything for her. But he's doing everything that she would have abhorred.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's that thing of like, when you first hear him give that speech, you're like, oh my God. But then midway through the film, you're like, oh, that was an unreliable narrator moment, because this guy's now, it's all about him.
Yep.
He's killing these kids to get his shit back. And yeah, he can argue that like, oh, this kid ruins other people's lives too. It's like, but not really.
You're right. Yeah.
Like,
and I do love that like his arc in kind of the first half of the film versus the second half is very different, because, you know, he comes in and then he tells Joe, you know, get out of here, go away, live your life, have a good life, blah, blah, whatever. But we see him having to put Joe back on the right path multiple times, which young Joe denies. He wants to go back the way he wants to, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, get out of here, get out. He's like saving him. So he's kind of the guide for a bit before turning into the antagonist. I think that it's so cool. That's why I love this film.
Well, and that's why, like, going back to like when he decides, so like I think he says, so I changed it.
Yep.
And when he does that, and just how Rian Johnson shows that moment was like, oh my God. That was when my jaw dropped. I was like, that's why people love this movie.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But for me, I was like, that's why I like this movie. Mm-hmm. Is you made a decision that I literally was sitting there, and whether it was consciously or unconsciously, I was like, how the fuck do you get out of this? It was almost like I was in DMing mode of like, you're simultaneously setting up an unsolvable problem, writing yourself into a corner. And you're like, I don't know how we solve this without something drastic happening. And this ends in a complete tragedy. And then it occurs to you and something happens and you're like, that's what it needed to be. Whether I knew it or not, that's what it needed to be this entire time.
It's closing the loop.
Oh, truly. Yeah. And it blew me away.
I'm
just
glad,
absolutely fucking like
my streak continues.
Yes, absolutely.
And
it's like
there are more Rian Johnson films I want to show you as well. Like I really want us to watch Brick at some point, because I really want to go.
Brick,
and
I'm really
as well.
excited about.
And Brothers Bloom, I want to watch again and get your like have a conversation with you about it, because I find that one really interesting too. Yeah, but like I said, I watched this movie. It came around that he was going to do Star Wars, and I was like, I'm so happy, you know. And again, having seen his work in Breaking Bad in between as well, like I was ready to, like, you know, love the stuff that he was going to do in the future. And as we've talked about a lot, like, I think that these days, the like movie star kind of mentality that we used to have is sort of gone, and that it has been replaced with like the directors. And I love that to a certain extent. You know, I think there's obviously lots of space to follow actors for certain things. But like, for example, I hear about Leonardo DiCaprio in a new film, and I'm not drawn to the film because Leo's in it. You know, I want to know
who's doing it,
who's making it. Yeah. And this, like, Rian Johnson is one of those creatives for me that everything he makes in the future I'll watch. And I'm probably not going to agree with everything he does all the time. And I don't, even with the things that I love, there are decisions within them that I go, okay. But it's really cool to be able to go and see like consistently good work from creatives that you love.
Yes.
And not just consistently good, but like it's consistent in its presentation too, if that makes sense. Like again, when you work with the same producing, editing, score, cinematographer for everything, it's going to feel similar, but I don't mean it as like,
you know, there's a certain level of quality that's going to be there.
I know these guys are going to do something good. Yeah. It's like, I'm not going, oh, everything feels the same, because it doesn't. There are certain things that, like watching a Spielberg film, you go, that's inherently Spielberg, and that's inherently Yedlin and inherently Rian Johnson, but it doesn't take away from that fact. It's nice.
No, not at all.
It evolve as well. As you said, you know, we were talking, that perhaps this isn't like your favorite written Rian Johnson film, but that's in a world where you've seen like Glass Onion and
other ones that came after this that he just continued to improve. It's like, the thing is, it's like
watching someone evolve over the decades is so interesting.
Absolutely. You cannot knock progress, right? Like early days Spielberg is very different. Like Spielberg needed to become Schindler's List Spielberg. You know, like he couldn't have made Schindler's List off of his first one. How could you?
Yeah.
Like you need to learn, you need to be able to grow. It's, you know, you and I talk about, like, as we're writing films and as we're doing stuff like that, we're like, there are ideas that we have that we almost sometimes put either on the back burner or wait a second, because it's like I don't know if I'm at a place where I know how to do this yet. Where it's like, and then you have people like the Daniels who will jump headfirst into that concept of being like, we don't know if we can do this, so why don't we try to figure out if we can do this as we go?
Yeah.
And but you need a certain level of understanding in the way that Rian Johnson makes movies. He, again, very much I don't know if he's autistic, but he certainly seems it, where it's like where in the best of ways, because he just is so thoroughly, he's so thorough with his stories, especially with his Knives Out shit. That's like, you pay attention to every fucking detail and nothing is left to chance. Like you didn't just come up with this story out of nowhere.
Could come from anything too, not necessarily neurodivergent. Like we know that he often, the genres that he dives into are genres that he loves, and it's like when you love something that much, it's like, you just you know it back to front. Which is always really impressive. So that's like my favorite thing about him, is that everything that I watch feels like it's coming from a direction of like, hey, I'm gonna make a like what's it called, like a heist film, or I'm gonna make a neo-noir film, I'm gonna make a sci-fi film, and it's like I know it well enough that it's gonna kind of challenge you a bit. I like being challenged when I go to watch things. So yeah,
absolutely. And that's why. Well, I guess, yeah, final thoughts about this film as well as just in general. Like, that's why, like, bottom line is Rian Johnson, as a creative, his shit is always going to be made with intention, is how I feel. And it's a thing of, obviously, like, I'm a bit of a heel when it comes to Last Jedi with you, just because it's fun and we enjoy that bit and we enjoy the running joke of it all. But I mean, truly, Rian Johnson is just one of those creatives right now that's just a consistent. If I see that he's put in something, I like going into stuff where I know that this person took time to make this for me. It didn't just, and not that people ever just crank stuff out, right? Like people always, I think, are trying to make something good or great, but just maybe it gets lost in the sauce or something. But this film just continues to prove why people give him stuff and why he works so well. And yeah, like this film just lives up to the hype. I highly recommend it to everyone who hasn't seen it. Again, it's not my favorite Rian Johnson film, but it is one that I really am glad I took the time to see. And thank you for showing it to me, brother. It's always fun to also see stuff that inspires your love of film and what you love about it. And that's always just a blast too.
I'm glad, man. I'm really, really glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, it's like I said, it's one that's really easy for me to recommend to people often. Yeah, like I love showing people this film.
Absolutely. Well, should we launch into cinema a la carte?
Yeah, well, it definitely makes sense because we always love to wrap up with a little game of cinema a la carte. And as a reminder for listeners, this is where we really get to show you the best way to experience this film through the metaphor of food. So we've each prepared a menu of our own with this week's film as the main course, along with an entree to start, a wine to pair, and a dessert to complete your journey. And you get to decide which set menu you love the most. So please be sure to let us know in the comments whose is better. And I've got mine ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here, Kay.
Yeah, why don't you give it a shot?
I, for this film, have put together a beautiful, beautiful menu. And I've called the menu, Quit Playing With Yourself and Do Your Homework.
Yeah. That's a great name.
We are going to start off with Minority Report, a film that I got to see earlier this year. A Spielberg film starring Tom Cruise. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. Deals with, again, like, you know, future cop kind of stuff.
Whoever showed it to you sounds like he has good taste.
Mostly great taste. One or two films aren't that great, but generally he's pretty good. Then we go into our main course, our meaty boy. It's Looper, which is the film that we watched this week. So we're going to go from there. We're going to pair that with a wine, Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a fucking good one.
Yeah, like a really, really cool film, criminally underrated, bombed at the box office because nobody knew what the heck they were watching. But go back, watch it. It's really
It
good.
is very good.
And for dessert, we're going to end nice and easy. Yeah, it's like you look at the menu and you just go, I've got all these options. I've got this like, volcanic chocolate fondue. I've got this like mixed insane thing with fire coming off it and gold flakes. I've got all these options for dessert. But you know what I want? I want vanilla ice cream. And your vanilla ice cream is Back to the Future by Robert Zemeckis. It's just, it's a classic.
Okay.
It's just, again, easy breezy watch. It's cool. It's cool. Like I love Back to the Future. It's a great series, but particularly the first one is what I'm recommending here. Even though the second's my favorite, I feel like the first one is a better dessert for this. So rattling it off again. And if you feel like you want some sprinkles on your vanilla ice cream, I'm gonna recommend District 9 as your sprinkles as well. It's not time travel related. That's why, sprinkles either give or take with this particular set menu. But it's, like I said, I needed a day a couple weeks ago where I was like, I just want to feel some kind of like comfort. And I did Looper and District 9 back to back watch. And I loved it. I loved it. So rattling off from the top, quit playing with yourself and do your homework. We've got Minority Report as your entree or your appetizer. We've got Looper as your main. We have a paired wine of Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat. And then we have Back to the Future as our vanilla ice cream dessert. What do you got for me, baby?
Well, you took Minority Report, so I had to take that off the list. But mine is called Timeless Tastes. And these are all things that have to do with the wonderful concept of time and the wonderful ways that time can affect us and make us think about things. So I want to start us off with Terminator 2. You can watch both Terminators if you would like, but I figured that if we want to talk about time travel classics, you cannot not acknowledge Terminator, one of my favorite two movies that ever exist, and it's great. Obviously, incredible stuff there. Wonderful, rich, meaty option to start over there, and then the main is Looper. To get you that nice crisp style. Now a wine to go with this one, mainly because you can kind of see where Rian Johnson got some of the poker face influence. I have the wine as Russian Doll.
Wicked.
Because of the series Russian Doll on Netflix. I haven't watched the second season, but definitely the first season at the very least. All about kind of that Groundhog's Day time loop thing, but does a really unique way of talking about it in terms of a therapeutic sense. One of my favorite series ever. Allie showed it to me, and ever since then, been in love. And then the dessert. We're going with the dessert that's supposed to kind of lull you into a sense of thought as you drift off to bed, as you drift off into the next night or whatever. Something that's going to really keep you going. That is Denis Villeneuve's Arrival.
Wonderful.
Because Arrival, how they play with time and how it comes up in the film, brilliant. Was still remember the day I saw that in the theaters, and literally walking out of the theater, and I was in the restroom, and there was a guy that was next to me, and he's like, "Did you watch the same movie I did?" And I said, "Did you see Arrival?" And he's like, "Yeah." And we both were like, what the hell did we just experience in the best of ways? It was like 10 people in the theater, but all of us walked away so deeply moved. Brilliant movie. Fucking love that movie. So just to reiterate for Timeless Taste, you're going to start off with Terminator or Terminator 2, Looper, Russian Doll, and Arrival.
I love it. They're great picks. Like I don't even want to knock it too much at all. Like it's good. It's great.
This one I felt pretty proud of.
Yeah, good work, dude. But yeah, like that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing the film, Nav.
No worries. I'm happy to bring films to you anytime because I have immaculate taste.
Well,
and unrivaled.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day, and so.
I'm
but
a looper,
nonetheless,
baby. I'm a looper. I always say the same thing, and it's always right. Nah, but take us out, Queen.
I'm just so right. But tell people where they can find you, baby.
Well, yeah, you can find me at Seen by Naf. There are links in the description for all of that, which is really exciting. Yeah, yeah, Seen by Naf. Anywhere you use your social medias is me. Otherwise, yeah. Kate, what about you, buddy? Where can they find you?
Well, absolutely. You can find me at Movie Man Opinions on anywhere you find anything. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You'll see some stuff there. I got some stuff coming down the pipe. Took a little bit of break of content creation, and hopefully once November is done, like we'll be able to just kind of make that going.
Yeah, wicked.
But yeah, nonetheless. So as we continue going.
Yeah. Well, a final reminder that you can find all the links to our individual pages in the description below, and there's a Google form you can fill out if you have a specific creator or film that you'd love to see on the podcast. And you can find one with the films on Instagram and TikTok, all your favorite podcasting platforms of choice as well. But for next week, we do have a returning guest. So Chase, or Forward Into the Black, is coming on to show us another gross film, as they are wont to do. I don't have a clip for you this week, because if we did, it would have been a prosthetic person falling to pieces or something like that. But yeah, we're watching The Thing, the 1982 version. And Kay, do you have any thoughts on that?
With Chase, it's always a little bit terrified.
Yes.
So I think I have the right amount of excitement and fear, which typically is my average date night. So I understand how that goes.
And
so
there was a remake for
time.
this film, is that right?
That it's a remake. It's a remake. It's one of those famous remake is arguably better than the original.
Because I've
films.
Because it's a 1982 version and there's a 2011 one as well, which I'm going to try and
technically this film has been remade 3 times.
Okay. What, do you know
there was
the
an original
was?
like in like the 50s, I think, like that. It was an older.
Oh yeah, I think I can see that here. Oh no, that's 1998. What? Oh, that's the making of.
The Thing original. It's a thing from another world. It was a horror sci-fi film in 1951.
Okay, cool. I wonder if I'll have time to check all of them out this week. We will see.
The most popular and the most well known is the Thing that was made in 1982, made by John Carpenter. Very much a classic horror shit. Definitely considered one of his best works.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm really excited to watch that film. So guys, be sure to check in next week. But yeah, we will see you there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.
Oh, that's what I want.